All right. Hey, everybody. So everybody is slowly queuing in. Give our brief introduction here. Welcome to today's Decisions Lunch and Learn. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Morgan Russell. My pronouns are they, them. And I've been with Decisions for 1.5 years. And I'm on the solutions engineering team. And real quick, before we jump into any questions, I just wanted to announce again and remind everybody that we do have the Decisions Day event coming up. So that's what we got advertised here. That's going to be this October in Norfolk, Virginia, and it is an in-person event. Let me drop in the chat the link for that so that y'all can go there. This is the link where you'll be able to register for it, sign up, and see more details. Right here in our topics little grid, we've got listed out some of the things we'll be covering in some of those sessions there. And if I close my PowerPoint, I'll show you what that looks like for us as well. So here's that Decisions Days form that if you use that link, it'll navigate you to. And it's got more information there on the agenda and where that'll be located at. Additionally, if you don't have this link or you lose this link, you can always get to this page by going to our decisions.com and clicking this register now button at the very top for the Decisions Days Norfolk, just to see that other info there for us. But as always, lunch and learn time. Be ready to go. You got already a hand raised. So just like that, you can raise your hand, you'll come off mute, ask a question, or throw it in the chat.
All right, this is JK. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when we define the RESTful endpoint within decision and followed by a bunch of methods from that endpoint, and let's say I use these methods in hundreds of flows all across the places, and now all of a sudden I realize that I have to disable the default proxy option for that the whole endpoint. So right now there is no provision for me to set that in one place because do not set default proxy setting is set at the method level. So that means I have to open all the places where that method is used one by one and then disable it. So is there a better way to do this change across the board quickly? So in my example, right, the whole RESTful endpoint is within our corporate network, so it doesn't need to go through any proxy at all. So that's the reason why we want to disable the proxy. And if I don't disable the proxy, then the call gets tangled up into the proxy server, and then it doesn't go anywhere, right? And the proxy server is meant only for calls going outside of the corporate network. And so anything internal, I want to disable it, and anything external, I want to enable the default proxy, right? So that's how the setup is in our current environment. And I'm just looking for a better way to enable or disable this proxy flag in one spot, rather than spread all across the place.
I'm trying to recall where to get to that. So when you have your method, is that
okay?
That's your setting in your your step that you're running it.
That's right. That's where it is right now. And so when you add the endpoint for your REST call, so first thing you do is that you define the endpoint where the URL is, and a few other attributes like the authentication and so on, and then you define each method one by one under that endpoint, right? So I was hoping that even under that method definition, if there is an option to disable the proxy, the default proxy, that would have been ideal, rather than exposing as a property inside a step.
So when it's that property inside a step, is it something that you can pass something into, or
it's a Boolean flag?
It's a Boolean, gotcha. So it's something like this where you can't pass something into it.
Yeah, it says do not use default proxy. So I mean, I looked around in the documentation. There is no provision. I'm just looking for a better way to apply this change right now. I mean, in the future, if there is an option enabled at the method definition itself as the default proxy setting, and then if user really wants to override it at the individual steps, they can always do it. But I think there should be one flag at the top level rather than exposing it at each and every
On the step level.
on the step level, exactly. Just to avoid making this changes to hundreds and hundreds of flows, which is going to be it's a laborious task, and plus I could miss one or two spots, and that could be a problem. Right?
Absolutely, it's very time consuming. And if it is just similar to how this checkbox is, it's not something you could set up to a subflow, so you can always run that subflow and determine it on the outside there. So yeah, that looks like right now if this is built in that same way, we don't have functionality for that to be dynamic. But that is a very good point as it being defined on a top level. So I think that could definitely be a DT as far as convenience or feature request if dev would like to see that as something to add as a new thing would be.
Okay. I'm hoping something at the method definition level would be a best place to put it in, and then let maybe you give that flag as a default in the step and let the user override it if needed. So that way you're not losing that functionality per se, but the default value should be driven off of the method definition. Right, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, it should be even go one step further at the global level, at the whole endpoint level. Maybe that would be a best place to put it in, because if I have one method bypassing the default proxy, then most likely I want to bypass the proxy for all methods in that endpoint, not just one, right? So maybe at the endpoint level, that would be a good place to put that in, and then you kind of pass in the default value to the step level and let the user override it if needed.
So and somebody on the call, correct me if I'm wrong, would the correct steps to carry this out would be to submit a support ticket on your behalf there to then add that in as a DT?
Yes, please. Okay. Yeah, and if you can send me the DT number once it's made, I can follow up, for tracking purposes.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, we can write that down and get that back to you there.
Thank you.
Mind if I share my screen, Morgan?
Oh, sure thing. Stop my share.
I just want to find the specific thing that you're talking about.
Sure.
So it's a super. Can you see my screen just as a new REST service method? Okay.
Yes.
All I'm doing is I'm integrating with myself. So it's very simple because I'm just trying to get the step. And then we're just going to go to test flow.
No, actually, after you add that, you have to add a method to it.
That was the method.
Oh, that
I
was
added the integration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So when I go to REST services, then I'm going to test integration, I add stuff. And so I'm trying to see right here, do not use default proxy, this thing, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the thing you're talking about. I'm wondering what if I go to my decisions instance, I'm wondering if there is a setting in the settings XML file where I can disable that. I'm not sure. I'm just wanted to, let's see. So I'm just gonna go Control F. Oops, it's all the way on my third screen. I just want to look at proxy. No proxy in there. Okay.
I mean, even doing it at this level, the instance level could be a problem, because I want one endpoint to go outside the corporate. In that case, I do want to use the default proxy, but if anything going inside within my network, I don't want to go through proxy, right? So that's why having that the endpoint level makes it more logical sense. But if there is a way we can do it from outside, I'm all for it.
I got you. No, I just wanted to share the screen just to make sure I understood what the step we were talking about, or the checkbox. Yeah, I think I agree with Morgan. We'll have to, that's a feature request to make this something that you can do dynamically, or you can say, hey, based on this column, this method, I wanted to do it that way. So
I don't want to be more of a configuration. Not dynamic. But if there is a way we can define at the endpoint level one time. So I may have 100 methods in that one endpoint, and it may be used in hundreds and hundreds of places. So I don't have to go to individual place to do it, but rather I would go into the definition of the endpoint. I would flip the flag, so that way it
Here,
inherited everywhere. Exactly.
on the method or something.
And not at the method, at the above this there is. Can you go one level up?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're right, that this integration folder right
Exactly.
here. So edit the service, use
right
internal
here.
proxy somewhere here.
Exactly. Under advanced option, maybe, you can just have that flag enable. So that way I can set it at one spot. I don't have to touch any other place.
Got you. Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely work on getting a DT or a feature request in for that, because definitely for your use case, that would be very helpful, where you can just edit it at that level.
Yep, exactly.
All right.
Okay, so what will be the next step? Are you going to contact me with the DT number? So how will that work?
Yeah, so what I will do is I'll do it right now. I'm going to send a message to the support team, and I'll say, hey, that there is a feature request GM by you, and I think you're with FIS Global, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, and I'll say, hey, there's this new feature request with FIS Global, and they can get it put in for you, and we can attach you to it so that you'll get the email. So when you log into Tirade in your customer portal, you should be able to see that.
Okay, cool.
So
okay. All right, you have my contact information, right? If needed.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Thank you. All right.
Awesome. And I just started typing the answer to this next question for Jeff about the namespace. Unfortunately, you cannot rename or change the namespace after a entity's been created. So once it's been created, if you leave it by default, it's going to name it whatever the folder tree is for that, and then underscore the sample, then underscore whatever your actual structure is called. So let me send, I just typed out a little answer there. But if I share my screen, I can show you what I am talking about there. So what we tend to do as a best practice when making a structure is just to name the namespace, whatever the project name is, so that you can, the full table name will be this project name underscore the structure. So if we go ahead and create a new one here, so let's create just a simple database structure. By default here, the namespace is whatever the folder path is, but what we tend to do is name this whatever your project's going to be. So if this was, sample project is what we're tying it to and what we, what it's a part of.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you could do that, but that's a good idea, actually.
It's often overlooked because it doesn't come up red and it's pre-populated, but that's something that you want to pay attention to when naming and creating your structures. So unfortunately, if you did want to, have your structure with a different namespace, you would have to recreate that structure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So if we save this, let's see what's, I'm in Biscarma. So this is in version 6. We got a whole bunch of projects on here that are popping up. All the code compiles there. So now once that is created, we'll see its actual namespace on there. It's just that sample project. So its full one is that underscore structure name that you'll see when you do the query, use the query editor. Let me take a look. Do we have any other questions? Okay. We have a question from Scott. It's when I've tried to recreate structures in the past, it tells me the same name already exists. If you haven't deleted, talk about deleted objects. Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got something of the exact same name, decisions, and let's just say we'll delete this rule here just to give an example. So we'll go to manage and then where's our delete for us? There we go, delete rule. So we'll delete that rule. So that was rule 1 that we're deleting. So now it's off our view here, but it's actually just turned a flag on for it so that it's deleted. So it's still in decision. So this is one way you can potentially recover things that didn't mean to delete or accidentally got deleted. If you go to the folder view of wherever you're working with or where that item was before it got deleted, and then change your report type. So classically, it'll just start off as all folder entities. If you hit change here, you'll bring up the second dialog where you can show with hidden, with deleted. Hidden is good for checking for, active form flows or advanced data grid structures. And then deleted is good to see the things that are still existing in the environment, but are just marked as deleted.
Yep, and I was familiar with all of that, but can you actually like permanently get rid of it then?
I believe from here to actually clear it all the way, I'm not sure how to absolutely remove it from the database unless it's through a SQL query. I believe is the way you would do that, through the query editor, to actually completely delete something there. Let's see. We can take a look at that.
Did the folder view and setting the archive date for the data structure not work?
Archive date for it. Oh, so if you set archive date, then that'll permanently.
Yeah, so you can do it the way you suggested, where you can expunge it from the database. But if you set the archive date to like today or tomorrow, then once it hits that date, then it's gone from the decisions.
So if we set it from today, we can mark that
Yeah, you might need to actually set that value.
at the time.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
yeah. I think that's why
I wasn't sure then, since we said unarchive. Okay, so we set a particular date for it.
Yeah,
Let's
I
try
think
that
that'd be in
for
the
us.
past.
So
Oh,
anything you have to
interesting.
set it in the future then.
I'm not sure. Try it in the future.
Let's
It
give
might
it a
be
shot.
something in the environment too.
So right now it's 12 p.m. So we'll set it for 12:20. So we have a few
Let's see what
minutes there
works.
to see. But yeah, if that's not able to work for you, you should be able to just write a query through it and either do it in your MySQL or your query editor here to remove it permanently, so you can take that name again.
Okay.
And let's see, I believe we have another question. Okay, I think it was John.
Hey,
Can
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked a question last week on a form I've been working on. It's basically a form with a list of line items, and these line items have a bunch of fields. One of these is the quantity, and I want to be able to add 2 new columns, which should be quantity add or quantity remove, to new fields or columns, where there you can add new quantities to add or remove, and then that would go to a data flow and select only the ones that the user has completed, and send those differences, those changes on quantity add and quantity remove by email. So I managed to do all the way with the form, with the list. I put like inline edit on the data grid. Put everything as read only except from these 2 new columns. And then it's calling the data flow, but the problem I'm having that I'm not sure how to solve is that it's calling the data flow once I update only one of the rows. I mean, I go to one of the rows, click on the quantity add, replace for a new number, and then when I click outside to go to a different row and edit another one, it just gets the loading indicator that it's calling the data flow. So I'm not sure how to avoid this from happening. That was the first question then.
Gotcha. So what was the component that you're using on your form again there?
I'm using a data grid for showing all the rows and the fields, and then an event button to call there the data flow.
Gotcha.
By the way, I'm using decision 6
Okay.
version.
Would you like that? Shouldn't be too bad. It would be about the same, but I can open it up there in 6 for us.
No, it's okay. Just in case we got a different.
Yeah, different changes
Stuff
there. We
there.
can make the form here.
Yep.
So that is a data grid. So, and you're using data flows there to do it. Makes sense. And what kind of structure are you passing into your data grid?
Let me check. So the way I'm doing it is I'm looking at the data grid itself. It's using a data structure there when it says pick types. I use line item fields, which is a structure I've created where I get all the information. Then obviously grid mode is inline edit. Data name all the line items that come from another flow. I mean, we got a main flow that is calling this form, and it's sending the line items along. And then all the fields here as columns, and then the other stuff. Let me see, because I don't remember where I put it. I think it was here. Yep, in the event button. When in the triggers part, I go and select run data flow and use the data flow I created apart from that, that calls there and updates everything along.
Okay,
That's
I
the
just
general
updated
idea.
that one that we made earlier. So that was, I believe, called sample table, so that it has a field called quantity. And we're
Will be
doing a
inline
single
edit.
inline edit there for us.
Yeah, that's the one I use at least. Yeah.
Inline edit. Whoop. Close that for us there. Oh, let me grab a button so our form will be happy. Go. Okay, so we have all our columns there from that field. Edit cell on click. I think so. And you were talking about adding and removing quantities. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is it adding another row or editing that particular line in that data that you were trying to do?
No, that particular line, basically what I did was adding on the data structure you're using there, the sample data, I think you selected. I added 2 new fields on that data structure, so it would appear there as columns. I added one called quantity add and another one called quantity remove. That was the other questions, because I tried to put no default number there, and it's putting a 0 anyway because it's an integer. I want to appear as empty the field, but that's a minor thing. I mean, first I wanna.
Yeah, potentially if that's as that issue as far as addressing that, you could save it as a string and then just convert it when you need it as an int to do calculations and things. That way I believe you could have it show up
as empty.
Blank.
Yeah, because it converts automatically to 0 because of the type, right?
It needs to have something there. Okay. So, and when you had your quantity add and quantity remove, you were doing that because in the back end, when your data flow gets kicked off, you're doing a calculation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm calling a data flow that basically for each is all the data that comes from that data grid, and it checks if the quantity add and quantity remove values have, if any of these have been completed, it goes and add them to a list of strings that basically I then send by email, which is every one of these rows that have a value there on at least one of these fields.
Okay, so you're sending those values by email.
Yep.
So I'm just going to make our quick data flow for us.
Yep.
Data flow there. off the bat. We'll just leave this for us. But since we're in 6, we'll have to define our flow input.
Mhm.
So it
There,
is,
I put the same type. Was
Mhm.
in your case, it would be sample data, right?
mhm.
Mhm.
Let me find it for us.
Sample
There we go. And it's a
sample
list
data.
of that type.
Mhm.
And this will just say grid data for us. And then you're just, you're not updating anything on the actual form itself? Or are you trying to change something on the form as well?
No, because I need just when I click on save changes, it will just close the form and then continue. I mean, call the update, this data flow, and then close the form. Nothing else.
Gotcha. Yeah. So this would, take place of going through and updating that for us. This would be like your send email stuff happens in here. You're able to pull that in.
Yeah. Yeah. I for
Mhm.
each all the data and then send the email. Right.
And you've got your flow input here. Whatever you've set up in here as your input, you'll have to hit the pencil icon and map in. You can either have it as input data, meaning it's coming from the start of your form, like when you place it as a step in your flow, or you can have it probably what we want to do here, since we're updating things here, is your form component. So we're pulling things from the actual element on the form. So we're going to select, oh, I don't think I named it, so it's probably going to be mad. So real quick, I'm going to just change it. So our form will let us close, and I'll go and rename this element here. It doesn't have a name for it. There we go. So this will be grid data. So now when we go back to that data flow and hit edit, let's change that to not be coming from an input called test, but coming from our form component that we just named called grid data. And this checkbox is good to take notice on. This means this data flow is, going to kick off every time something in this particular data changes. It's going to run on value changed. So we do want that selected here for this use case, I believe.
I'm not sure because what I need is not to run this to run the data flow every time something changes. I need to do it when you click on the button.
Okay,
I mean,
so you're having it on an event button. Gotcha. Yeah, so you'd want that unchecked.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I
Okay,
have
gotcha.
That's right.
Perfect. Okay. So then we'll just have to add that event button because we don't want it to auto run by itself.
Yep.
So let me create our event button there.
Yep.
And we were
then on triggers. On triggers, I put there the call for the data flow.
Yep. So now on triggers, event button click. And these names that populate here are whatever you name your components. So right now I named the text save, but I didn't rename the actual event button itself. So it's still its default event button in there. So if you have a larger form, it's a good idea to go through and
practice. Yep.
Exactly, to rename those to make sure which one you're talking about. Okay, so we've got that selected.
I put there a show loading indicator as well, so I can see
when it's spinning.
Yeah, when it's running. Yeah, when it's
Absolutely.
running. What is happening is basically this: that when I change one row, it goes and start the loading, and I need to do it when you click the button. That's the issue I'm having.
So you said it loads when you do what?
It loads whenever I change a value on the form.
Oh, okay.
Instead of loading when I click on the event button. That's the problem I'm having.
Gotcha. And you've checked here that we have none of the other triggers set. Just your event button.
I'm just checking here. It's on the form properties, right? I have the flow inputs completed, the flow output as well, and then the triggers. Yeah, this selection and value change are not checked. Only the event button. Click and then there is then there is blocking and show loading indicator is checked as well.
Okay, so, and then here we're making sure that is not checked.
Let me see that one.
So that's your input mapping to your data flow.
Oh, that's the problem I had, I think.
Okay, so it's trying to run at the very beginning for you.
Yeah, run on value changed. I had that one
by default. It is checked. So if for most use cases, you usually want it. If you're looking at that data, it's whenever you change it. But in this particular case, you don't want to be doing that by your design. So you want to uncheck that.
Let me check if it works now. I'm debugging right now, so I can see if. Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Oh, no worries.
No, it's loading anyway.
It's still going. Okay, interesting.
Oh no.
Here we can throw this
that.
in a
Sorry,
flow
sorry
to
that sorry that was my bad. I think I didn't save it because of this debug button. You just it just saves automatically, but it was the flow, not the form. So let me check again. Just one moment. So let's see. Yeah, I think now it works.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of settings and decisions, and sometimes they have overlapping features. So it's always good. That's why we have like they're saying, you know, explain it to like your decisions duck, your little squishy friend there at your coding table, and walk through all those steps. Helps a little bit there.
Yeah, at least right now it's working as it should, and it should have the two. Let me check only the values to see if I have the proper information here. Input data, quantity add, I have this one, and quantity remove, I have this one. Yep. Yeah, and I'm getting the input data with the updated values, so I think it's good to go right now. And the other question I had was because of these default values, and as you said, I can update to string instead of using int, and then before doing a calculation or something.
Yeah, you would convert string to int, exactly.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got a question here from Jeremy. So how do I move an external database connections from dev to production? Is that done through the repository? And if so, what would be the best practice for that? So external database connections. I'm trying to think if so is that just an integration with another database or?
Correct, and I'm in version 7.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's just like in the system integrations and databases.
All our folders here.
And so I have several database connections in here to external system. Just need to know the best practice of getting those moved from the dev environment into production. That way everything's the same when I move a project into production.
I haven't had experience doing this myself, but by looking at it, it does look like that's something that can be pushed to the repository. It looks like it could be tied to a project here, or is this might just be this folder? Let me take a look at this. Right click here. It looks like, yeah, if you're moving something to the repository, you have to first add it to a particular project, and then you can check it out.
I don't have the designer repository option when I right click on the databases folder.
If you haven't set up a repository.
I do. I have other projects in my repository.
Gotcha. So when you right click it, this still doesn't come up for you in this particular
folder. You're right clicking on the connection. Okay, I saw where you were clicking on. I thought you were clicking on the containing databases
folder. Yeah. No, on that actual connection
database.
So it should have those properties for you there.
Okay.
I'd have to circle back. Is there anybody on the call who knows if that's particularly the best way to do that? But it's definitely one way to get it from one environment to the next is through the repository. I think that's usually a good way to do it. Move things to the repository. That way you can test in the repository kind of as your secondary or secondary location to see how it works out. Everything moved there before moving something from dev to prod. And then checking it out from your repository on your production environment.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I would suggest.
I'm going to share with you a document, Jeremy. We do have a production ready checklist. So let me put this in I'll put this in the chat for everyone so everyone can have access to it if you have this question. So that may work. I haven't attached, my experience, I've never attached a external connection to a project. In my head, I'm interested how that works, because I know you'd have to make sure that that server that you're checking into also has the ability to connect to that database via permissions and all that stuff. And I know in the production ready checklist I just linked, that's one of the things that you want to make sure that you already have in that prod environment or in that environment you're going to, that all your external connections to your database or things like that are already set up so that
So
it
I
can
would
just,
So you want me,
yeah.
so I would need to set them up manually in both environments is what you're going for.
I believe so. I would definitely try what Morgan showed because that may be the better dynamic way to do that. I just know from previously when I've done this, and this could be something that I'm sharing you with version 6, and it may be different in version 7. So this may be an updated feature where now you can export the external connection to the project and then it'll create it for you on the new server end. But from our documentation here, it seems like it's wise to manually set it up. But
Jeremy, this is Tyler. It really depends on your processes because I know a lot of people have a test database they connect to in test and for the development, and then a prod database they connect to in prod. So it really depends on your environment, your process. So we have best practice. We don't really have best practices because a lot of people set it up separately because they have a test database and they have a production database they test against with decisions. And some people have your scenario. So we don't have a really best practice. I've never done the add to projects. I'm an old IT guy, so I want to create the connection myself from prod to test. But you can test that, but that's just where we don't have a best practice because we don't want to tell people, okay, push to production with your testing credentials and your test database, and then of course it doesn't work in production. All the database want to test. So that's why we really don't put best practice on that because everybody's environment's a little different in that scenario, connecting to external systems.
So I was just reading a follow-up question off of what you had brought up there, Jeremy, about discussing how we handle connections to databases that are conditional on the region that are set up with the code running there. It's for APIs invoking against an external dev and production environment. I do not have any experience. I can't talk much to that. Not sure if anybody else on the call knows about how we would do that for different environments. So if you're selecting a different region, like where you're logging in from, and how your decisions environment is set up there, that it would pair with a different database, having that set up. But off the bat, I'm not familiar enough with that to provide a proper answer there.
Morgan, this is Alex. I'm wondering, this is probably more my ignorance about the repository's capabilities than otherwise. But the problem is that while we are developing, we are connecting to internal or external databases that are usually development, accessing APIs from development environments or maybe production environments. It depends, right? External APIs. So we're making calls to different systems that are responding with data. At a point, all that development has to be promoted to different environments. And I don't know whether the repository is the place where you say, okay, when you are on when your code is going to be run on your development environment, these are the external database connections, the internal database connections, the internal APIs, external APIs, endpoints that you're invoking, etc. And while you move to the next environment, the list is this, and in the next environment, the list is that. I don't know whether that is that handled by the repository. In other systems that we have developed, we put all that in a database, and we read that database at startup and get all the values from it. But it's not an ideal situation. If I have a repository, I can do that.
So I can provide some light on that question, Alex. So I just got confirmation from one of our solution architects. So going back to Jeremy's question, I'll lead into Alex's. So you can just export your external connection and import it in your prod environment or attach it to a project. So you don't have to manually set up the connection. You can if you want to be that old IT guy that Tyler was talking about. But if you want to be more, kind of groovy with what the new kids do, you can just import, you can just export it, import it. So that being said, and then to what you were talking about, Alex, how does it handle this? Basically, what happens is our repository server, it's just a server that houses those projects. It's kind of like our software development lifecycle for decisions utilizing the repository, where you can say, I have this main project that has those API integrations, that has those external connections, and that's attached to a project or your main branch. And then what you would do is you would just create, you would cut a branch and say, hey, I want to check out this project, and then I want to use it. And if you want to add development on just that one and not affect trunk, then you would just create another branch and do it that way. So the repository is basically just the decisions version of the software lifecycle, where you can still have the main trunk application and then branch off different shoots of that. If you have devs that want to add, remove, or create additions, but don't want to overwrite the main branch or the main trunk that's being used in your prod or in the main repository environment. So that's basically how that would work, is it will all be attached to the project. And so if I export a project that has those API integrations, that has those external connections, it would all come with that project. And so if I export it and give it to you, you'd have all that information you would need to run it. Did that answer your question?
I probably would have to try this, but I don't have a repository implemented, so I don't know how to do that. But I think that I understand what you're doing, Jared.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to do it in order to be sure that I truly understood it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I just dropped in the chat. There's the link to the overview, and it's got a bunch of really good sub articles here on different things of setting up the single sign-on for it, setting it up at the very beginning, as well as just how to use it, and some frequently asked questions there as well for the repository.
Morgan, can you go back into the decisions in your decisions instance and go to, I want to say it's go to settings and go to repository. So go to like the settings, system settings, and then go to repository.
Let's see. I miss it here. If not, I can go back to
designer repository.
Oh.
So yeah, you had it on the other screen.
Gotcha.
Up at the top, number 15.
Gotcha. Designer.
So another thing we can use to expand upon this is your designer repository will set to your, let me move my question answer. Be set to, defaultly your decisions is server here or server. And if you want to, like Alex was talking about, you have to test this out. This is where you configure that to tell decisions, hey, I want to use this other server, not the local machine or not the server that decisions is installed against, as the repository. And you'd put in this connection to allow that. And if you want to use single sign-on, where you don't have to automatically log in to check in or check out a project, you can configure that with your own single sign-on flavor if you have one. So that's kind of where all that settings is adjusted. But by default, it uses your local machine as the repository server. And then if you want to configure it to use in a separate server, then you would add that URL here.
And then once that's configured, then you would have the option when you right-click a designer folder, to interact with the designer repository settings there that we were looking at earlier, to add project, check out, check in. If you do it to something that's already tied to a project, you'll have the ability to check in changes and check out to something that's already tied to a particular project. So this is the headless rules demo tied there. I always forget it's the designer repository tucked away in there. And then you have the studio settings as well, where you can edit a lot of things on how you set up your studio environment there. Take a look to see if there's any other questions so far.
Sorry, but I think that the problem that Jeremy was asking, and I expanded on his, is where do you put the configuration for the database connections that you're going to be using in each of the environments where you need them? is that do you have to replicate the entire project with the system's definitions for each of the databases, or it is done at the repository level and it is the repository the one that selects which connection to use in each environment when you deploy? I'm not sure whether the question I'm formulating it in a clear manner or clearly enough manner. And Jeremy, by all means, feel free to add, because it was your question originally.
Okay, so in that case, it could be both ways. So you don't need to export the entire project. You know, as Morgan showed earlier, you can just right-click that external connection and export and import that. So if you just want that single thing, you can just export and import that. If that's what you want. If you want the external connection and the project it's tied to, you can also do that as well. So it's you can handle it by decisions, export import process, or you can just, you know, get it or set it up manually is the answer to Jeremy's question, I believe.
And I think your question about routing them, of what's tying to what, I believe that would happen just in the repository itself. So you'd have to have whatever your projects are pointing to, whatever database that you want the information to be tied to, that's you want to show in your repository, you'd have to have those also there, and it's particularly pointing. So I believe that would be set up in your repository settings. So I don't believe there's anything dynamic off the bat that's going to allow you to change off where, you know, your project's coming from. It's just particularly in those project settings, what connection they're using in your repository.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. That was a fun one to figure out. The repository is a great feature if you have it, or if you're looking into to using them to move stuff around between your environments there. Let's take a look if we have any other questions for us this morning. Let's check to see if that thing, since we set the that rule that we set its archive date, I can see if it actually disappeared real quick for us, or if that still had an error. Oop, didn't mean to edit that. So folder view, hit the settings cogwheel for this page, hit change on the report type to look at deleted. See, it's still showing up here as still deleted. And it did have an archive date, so it might be that this environment, it just didn't save entirely what time it wanted to be archived. Yeah, so it's not saving it there because of this. You follow the It might have to be undeleted to set an archive date. I'm not sure about that. I've not interacted with that too much before. Like we said, you can still do it through the query editor to just remove it from the database itself and delete that file to rename something. So it'll otherwise we'll still be taking up that name of that particular element type in the database there. All right, we had a ton of really great questions, so much that we didn't, I didn't have to show bingo or my prepped text merge project there. So save that for next time if we don't have questions. But since nobody has raised their hand or typed anything, we can go ahead and wrap up. Oh, we got a hand. There you go, Scott. You got it.
I just got it in there.
No worries.
Question, I'm thinking about the folder permissions and
Okay.
what you see in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Can admins see all the folders by default, or
if there's things set up for them? I'm not 100% sure if just because you have admin, you'll be able to see everything off the bat. We can test it out though. We go to, yep, I'm already in Lunch and Learn. Let's just add a new folder. We'll make this folder a root folder so we can see if we can hide it. So I'll move my folder to root. I'm on Biscarma, so people have to deal with that on this. And this is in 6, but you do the same thing in 7. And let's see, I don't think there'll be any permissions set up on this since I've made it. So we'll go manage permissions. Yeah, we have nothing off the bat. So let's see if I have a test account I can log in with here. So on this folder, let me just make a quick test account. Actually, I can just stay in my own login and go to portal view. Are you mean in portal view? What they
No,
can
in
see?
studio view.
In studio? Unless something's particularly hidden from them, I believe they won't be in studio view.
The scenario is this: I had one of my
Mhm.
developers create a folder, and I was going to work with her on it, and I can't see it.
Was it built in what is it, my documents folder? I'm not sure if I have an environment that still had it, but in previous versions there would be a, I think is it called my apps now? There's a folder at the very top that would be called my documents, or my something that's kind of your default folder off the bat, and nobody else can see what's inside of there or move anything that you create inside of there. So like this particular sandbox folder and what's inside of it's not accessible by any other user besides the user that's their folder. So it's kind of like your own home little base there, but nobody else can interact with it. So it's possible, but that is the reason. But off the bat, in Studio, you have access to everything unless it's particularly hidden from you, especially as an admin.
That's what I would have expected. So
yeah, that's definitely leading me to think that it was in that particular little folder there. Let me see if I've got it on my local. Yeah, my documents. So if anything that was built in here, somebody else won't, any other user that's logged in. So anybody that's not morgan@decisions.com, anything I build in here, they would not be able to see or have access to. Like it can interact in other flows and you can see it, but you can't go to it itself and like edit it inside this folder because it's user locked there. But your developer can move things out of there.
Yep.
Just move it to a different folder.
That is where she put it. So perfect.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I was just confused. I was like,
oh yeah, absolutely. No, it'd be like, hey, I'm an admin.
Well, usually that's how it works, but
yeah, absolutely. So it's best practice not to develop in there unless it's just things you're not sharing. So like I'll put a sandbox in there that's just for me, that I'm not trying to connect to real projects, and it's just to like test things around potentially in there. But even so, it's best to not have anything in there, because just in case some of your flows or something is causing an error, nobody else who comes into the system will be able to fix it if it's not your login.
Yep.
So yeah, overall best practice not to build in it.
Yep.
I think in later versions it's actually moved or hidden off default there. So yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No
Glad I got
problem.
it in under the wire.
Nice. All good, all good. We're here for it. So if you have anything else, we got that 5 minutes, so no worries. Let's take a look. And I will be hosting tomorrow, I think. Yeah, I took over the slot for Josiah, so I'll be hosting tomorrow as well. So if we don't have any questions, but if you do, feel free to pre-submit them ahead of time or just bring them on in and we'll answer them the best we can. If not, I've got a text merge project that we can look at together. So that'll be fun. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for the great questions, and for everybody on the call, panelist wise, for helping me answer them. Definitely appreciate it. And we'll see y'all tomorrow or whenever you tune in next. Thanks so much.